More of the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
All right, welcome back in. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey on this Tuesday. 4:15 is the time as we broadcast from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios. A long one in Philadelphia last night as the Phillies go down to the Astros by a final of 13-4 and have to sit through a little under a 2-hour rain delay. A man that was on the call, the TV broadcaster for the Houston Astros, was Todd Callis, and he's going to hop on board with us right now. Of course, the son of Harry Callis as well, and Todd's kind enough to give us a few minutes on this Tuesday. Todd, appreciate a few minutes. Thanks for the time, and how are you?
I'm doing well, Zach. How's it going?
Well, I'm doing great, and I appreciate you coming on. So this has to be a great season for you and not a bad time to start your broadcasting career in Houston as the voice of the Astros. Some start this team's off to.
Unbelievable. I mean, I knew they were good coming out of spring training. I didn't think they were this good. I mean, it's 99 games in, and they've won two-thirds of their games. They're playing phenomenally well on the road. They're playing well enough at home, and they're just doing great things. Their offense is scoring at a rate that I've never seen before, so it's been a lot of fun.
You look at this team the last few years. They beat the Yankees in that wild card game. Then they missed the playoffs last year, and they start off this season as we're already through the All-Star break, 66-33. We know George Springer's been very good. Altuve has been very good as well, in addition to the starting pitching. When you look at this team, what specifically is working this year that they responded coming off that down year from a year ago?
I think they've just got a combination that blends itself very well with the young talent that is Correa and Altuve and Springer. Even though Correa is hurt right now, he was really right there with Correa or with Springer with the best numbers on the season. Now Altuve's on fire, but all along it was the pitching that was a question mark. But Dallas Keuchel went down, and somehow, some way, they got through that. They actually extended their lead in the AL West without their opening day starter. Brad Peacock and Mike Byers have done a really good job in the rotation. Now everybody's coming back healthy. Colin McHugh's back, and Lance McCullers Jr. had a short stint on the DL. And the former Philly Charlie Morton is back. He's pitching tonight. And then we'll see Dallas Keuchel this weekend up in Detroit. So what's working the best is they just score runs at an unbelievable clip, and it's really hard to get through this lineup 1 through 9 more than once or twice.
How will this team be in the postseason, in your opinion? I know they have some experience, but since it's being more of a younger team, how do you think they'll look in the postseason this year?
I think the fact that there's a group of veterans like a Brian McCann and a Carlos Beltran, Josh Reddick, who are here, kind of helps balance out that youthful energy and enthusiasm and keeps them grounded a little bit, because this is a team that should be very full of themselves right now, but these veterans do a good job of keeping things balanced. When you look at the postseason, the one team that's had the Astros number this year is the Cleveland Indians. They have won 5 of the 6 games, and the season series is over now. And that's a team that's a little scary in terms of a matchup. So we'll see. I mean, there's still a little bit of time left before the trade deadline, and we'll see if the Astros make a move. But I think right now, offensively, there is no team that can even come close to matching what the Astros have done this year.
If they're going to make a move, where would you anticipate them to make a move?
I think one or the other. I think they either get an arm that can be one of their top 3 starters in the postseason, or they look to try and shore up their bullpen and try and shorten games with what they have now, so maybe add an arm or 2 in the bullpen. In a perfect world, they do both, and they have enough talent in their minor league system to do that. But I would think that more than likely it would be one or the other. I think they'll add to their pitching staff.
Todd, you mentioned the unfortunate injury to Carlos Correa, and we know how good of a season he was having. What's the timetable for his return to the team?
I'm looking at mid-September. He's a young kid. He's 22 years old. Won't turn 23 till later in the month of September. So I don't think they're going to rush him back, but at the same time, he might be able to recover a little quicker than most. Mike Trout lasted 7 weeks and 3 days from the day he underwent surgery till the day he played in a big league game. So if that's the same timetable, we're looking at like September 10th through 15th, somewhere around there for Correa to come back.
Talking to the TV play-by-play man for the Houston Astros, and that's Todd Callis on the Zach Gelb Show. Todd in his first season with the Astros after a very long career with the Tampa Bay Rays. Just how'd you end up back in Houston, Todd?
They had an opening. Bill Brown, who had been there 30 years doing television for the Astros, decided at the end of last year that he was going to retire, and he kind of gave me a heads up somewhere in September when we were in town. And so I was one of many who applied and went through the process, was fortunate enough to get whittled down to the final 5 or 6, and then was chosen from there. So it was a tough call initially because I love the Tampa Bay area and I loved working for the Rays for 19 years. I knew it was going to be pretty much a perfect situation to get me to leave there. And this Astros situation, the opening to do TV play-by-play, was about as perfect as it gets for me.
Man, I say end back in Houston because we all know your legendary father started his MLB broadcasting career in Houston, and that's when you were coming out of the womb at that time when your dad was in Houston. So what do you remember about the earlier days of your dad in Houston and your family as well?
Most of what I remember from Houston prior to this was just stories that Dad used to tell. But I do have vague memories of Astro World, which is an amusement park right across the street at the time from the Astrodome. It's no longer there. And I kind of remember going to games at the Astrodome, but I don't have a lot of vivid memories. All my baseball memories, for the most part, resided with the Phillies and Veterans Stadium. But there's still a couple of memories of being inside the Astrodome when I was very young.
And you know how special Philadelphia remembers your dad, just the iconic voice of Harry Kalas, a beloved figure in the history of Philadelphia sports. When you walk back into the city of Philadelphia now to do a game, and I know it's a different stadium from when most of the time your dad was here in Philadelphia, what memories do come back to your mind about the time that you and your dad did share when he was the voice of the Phils?
Yeah, this is a great area. I'm very blessed to have grown up here. I love this area. I'm one of the few from my high school who's actually left the Philadelphia area. So when I come back, it's kind of like a mini high school reunion. And then just all the memories of being back here at Citizens Bank Park and knowing there were a lot of memories here. But as you said, most of them for me growing up were at Veterans Stadium. But still seeing a lot of the same Phillies people that I worked with as an intern one of my college summers. I worked with the Phillies, and then going to all those games, of course, getting to know a lot of the front office people. So there's people that have been here with the Phillies 20, 30, 40 years, and it's so good to see all these familiar faces. So I think as much as any team in baseball, the Phillies have a family feel, and it's great to really see all these people and get to reunite with some faces that I haven't seen in a few years.
Having a dad that works in sports broadcasting, and my dad fortunately got to spend a few years working with your dad. There's nothing like it being the kid of a someone that's involved in sports broadcasting. For you, your dad being the voice of the Phillies, because you get to see the benefits of that, and you get to have so much great access as a kid when you go into work with your dad. Just give me a distinct memory from some of your earlier years when you would go to work with your dad, and just some of those things that you remember as an early kid in Philly.
A couple things. I used to keep the out-of-town scoreboard on Sunday afternoons. This was well before they had all the scores on the computer, on their own personal computer. So we used to have ticker tape that would give all the out-of-town scores. So I would keep an out-of-town scoreboard for the guys up in the booth. So that was cool to see how Dad and Whitey and Wheels and Andy would interact, both on the air and in between innings, and how much fun they used to have together. But the other thing, and the thing that sticks out the most to me, is the way Dad treated absolutely every single person that he came across, whether it was a fan, whether it was a part-time worker who was selling peanuts at the vet, or whether it was the vice president or president of the team. He treated everybody the same. And he always had time for the fans, and he always had time to say hello and have a conversation with people who really weren't going to make an impact in his life, and he knew just by spending a little bit of extra time with that person, he was going to make an impact on their life, and he always had time for people, and that to me is what stood out.
When did you know that you wanted to become a broadcaster?
Probably in my sophomore, junior year, somewhere in college. Went to University of Maryland my freshman year, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, toyed around with a couple of different majors, decided to transfer to Syracuse, thinking, all right, if I go to Syracuse, I know it's going to be the best kids around the country who are there. So I'll see where I kind of fit in the pecking order. And it was very competitive up there. I was up there at a time when there were very many talented broadcasters, many of which are still working either at local markets or at the national level. And so when I was there, I went for a dual degree at Syracuse, and I thought, well, broadcasting doesn't work, I'll fall back on the marketing degree and make something work with that. Fortunately enough, broadcasting worked, but it wasn't really until I got up to Syracuse and saw what it took to be a broadcaster and saw where I stood kind of in that pecking order with a group of very talented young broadcasters.
There's so many great broadcasting families and so many sons that have gone on to do great things. You look at Joe Buck now with Fox, Kenny Albert as well. And all those guys, they have to prove that they're really good to get those jobs, and they have to, for a time, live a little bit in the shadow of their father. How did you try to break away a little bit and prove to the world that, hey, that you were good enough to do this for a living?
I just think the fact that my path took me to some different teams initially, whether it was the Mets or the Louisville Redbirds prior to that, or doing some Florida State League baseball prior to that, and then kind of carving out my own niche when I was down with the Tampa Bay Rays. I always would love Philadelphia, and I always loved visiting back here, and enjoyed the 3 years I worked for Prism and Sports Channel Philadelphia when I was here. Would have been great if it worked out. Things, though, have worked out tremendously well for me. I loved my time with the Rays, and this first year with the Astros couldn't be any better. So, I think if I stayed in Philadelphia, there would have always been that little connection, and probably always would have been that comparison between Dad's style and myself. And while I wouldn't have minded it so much, I did kind of want to do my own thing at some point in my career.
And one of those special moments in your dad's career and also your career was when the Rays and the Phillies met up in that 2008 World Series, and you got to join your dad in the booth for an inning and do a little talk together. Just how about that memory, the 2008 World Series, and that time when you got to go on the air with your dad?
Yeah, there's nothing, Zach, that could top that. That was, to me, the pinnacle of broadcasting. To be able to work a World Series with Dad, opposing sides, knowing one of us was going to be the winner of the 2008 World Series. And we kind of knew at the time that it was a very special moment and one that we may never get a chance to replay again in our lives. But we had no idea that we would lose Dad the very next April. But spent a lot of lunchtime with him, spent a lot of time at the ballpark with him. Got to call an inning with Dad in Game 1 of the World Series 2008 in Tropicana Field in St. Pete. So it was really special. It was one of those seasons you could never have believed if it was kind of scripted, because the Rays have never won more than 70 games in any season prior to the 2008 season in 10 years. So their odds of getting to the World Series by themselves were infinitesimal, and then you add in the fact that they met up with the Phillies, and it was just a perfect situation.
Did Dad rub it in your face a little bit when the Phillies won?
Yeah, we always went back and forth a little bit, so there was always that. He definitely rubbed it in a little bit. He knew, though, that at that point of the Rays franchise, he knew that was a pretty young team. They would have a shot to get back in there. Not that the Phillies didn't, but he knew that I would have an opportunity at some point to watch the Rays do well. And they would end up making the postseason 4 out of 6 years, including that '08 season. But we always had a little trash talking going back and forth, so he had the upper hand for a while.
Wrapping up with Todd Callis, who joins us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. You don't need me to tell you this, but your dad's a legend here in Philadelphia. He's an iconic voice. So many people have the connection just after all those years of watching and listening to your dad. Does it at all amaze you after all these years just how fondly remembered your dad is by these fans? And you said it, your dad did everything the right way, treated people the right way. But how about how the fans just still love your dad even after all these years?
It's really cool to see, and you're right. It kind of is amazing. Here we are, 2017, and we haven't had Dad with us for over 8 years now, believe it or not. It seems like time flies. But, yeah, the connections are still here. They're still tangible and prevalent. And you look out in left field, and there's Harry the Case and the statue, and they still play High Hopes after a win, and you hear the out-of-here call after a home run. The Harry Callis broadcast booth is right down the wing from where I'm standing. So, yeah, it's great. It's great, and I love the fact that, I always knew there was a special connection here between Dad and the Phillies fans, but to realize how much of an impact he made on so many lives since his passing, with so many great stories I've heard from fans and great letters I've received from people and reading stuff online. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to know that your dad meant so much to so many, and it is truly a blessing for us to have spent that time in Philadelphia and for Dad to have that great connection.
And you can't forget about the players, because the players, they love your dad. Every time we have a former Phillies player on, they always talk about the great Harry Callis.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. He had, he was always out with the broadcast guys, but then he had kind of a different relationship with players than a lot of announcers do. He was almost like he was part of the team, one of the guys and one of the 25. So, yeah, Dad had a way of just endearing himself to that group, whether it was, the 80 World Series champions. That 93 team was probably his favorite team of all time, just because there were a bunch of crazy guys who overachieved at times. So, yeah, it was. He always seen the Phillies players over the years had some really good times together.
You look at the current state of the Phillies. We know your dad would want them to be in a current spot, but they're working in this rebuilding process under the general manager in Matt Klentak. How about the current state of the Philadelphia Phillies, in your opinion?
So they're in a position now where they're kind of finding out who's going to be the people that they're going to work with in the future. It can be an exciting time. It really depends on your perspective. It's never fun to go through a rebuilding, but when you do, you kind of look on the field and say, all right, can this guy project to be our starting right fielder for the next 3 to 5 years? Can this guy be our starting shortstop? You start going around the diamond, and you get to kind of play GM as a fan and see who you like and who you don't like. And there are going to be some bumps and bruises along the way. It's not going to be smooth sailing, and certainly this year has been difficult. But recently they've scored some runs. I think before last night it had been 7 straight games where they had 5 runs or more. So you're seeing some flashes here and there. And it's never easy. The Astros went through it not too long ago themselves where they were losing 110-plus games. But usually there's a payoff at the end.
Todd, we appreciate it. We can't thank you more than enough for doing this today. And best of luck moving forward, and best wishes to the Astros for the rest of the season.
All right, Zach. Great talking to you.